feel like Gordon Bombay would have taken his career to even further heights.
Everything's flashy, everything's cocaine, everything's
Fun.
Open wide for some soccer.
I don't care what you think about what your personal thoughts are at home. I care that you hate the
Call
Cowboys.
this college rule.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. Chris and Dom here. And before we begin, as always, make sure you follow us on the social medias there for the Sports Experience and both of our personal ones for comedy, because we're just a couple comics who like talking sports, bringing you guys some information. And make sure you like, follow, subscribe, and most importantly, listen to all of these episodes, because we're putting out some quality content down here at Engel Studio for all your recording needs in downtown Tucson.
That's right. Nice little cut there. Now, who are we talking about today?
We got probably the most important baseball player as far as where we are financially in the game today.
That's very true, where he really changed. And technically, I didn't
Professional
even know.
sports, all
Yes.
professional sports, honestly.
You're not wrong. So we're talking about Curt Flood, the man who went up against baseball.
The man who
that's
basically told baseball, hey, we're not student athletes.
I knew it. I was like, that's going to get dropped so much on this.
It will, because when you see these Supreme Court cases
Oh,
and the wording of this legalese, you're like, oh, America, there were definitely men of their time after their time, if you know what I'm talking about.
It's
Chris.
insane. And the just the fact that he actually technically didn't win, and we'll bring it up later, it was overturned after his court case. And it's so... Yeah.
Well, he didn't win. He exposed the BS.
He exposed, yes. And made it to where the players' union was just like, all right, he was right. The reserve clause needs to go right now.
Yeah, it will benefit everyone across the board. So Curt Flood, Curtis Charles Flood, born January 18th, 1938 in Houston, Texas, but raised in Oakland by his parents.
Well, I'll be honest. His life started just a life of racism.
His mom grew up in very segregationist South.
Well, that's why they said they had to move to Oakland. Was she got into a fight with a white woman?
Yep.
And they said if they had continued to live there, they probably would have lynched his mother. That's not even... It's so ridiculous.
A lot of lowercase t's.
A lot of lowercase t's.
For time to leave.
Time to leave. So, luckily, though, because we see who he ends up playing baseball with in high school, and growing up, which are actual major leaguers later in life.
Not only major leaguers.
One
is probably a top 10 and the other borderline Hall of Famer.
Exactly.
So his youngest of 6 kids, described his upbringing as not poor. We had nothing, that is. We ate at regular intervals as far as meals, but not much.
Yes.
So it's not moving to East Oakland, to escape the racism and everything. Still seeing it in Oakland, but
it's not Houston.
It's not. It's different racism.
It's a different racism.
And when we go through his minor league career, we'll see some more of that.
Oh my God, it's ridiculous.
So at age 9, he starts really playing baseball for the first time, and like you said before, it's a hotbed of talent there in Oakland.
It is. It's pretty wild when you look back on it. Just these 3 players coming out: him, Frank Robinson. It's
Vada Pinson for those red legs at the time.
Yep,
was an all-star. He growing up, in addition to his baseball skills, he was a good artist as well. He knew how to sketch and draw.
Well, I saw that his parents really pushed for them not just to be in sports teams, but always be like in some sort of musical, you know what I mean? So they were very into the arts.
Yes.
Coming out of the, 50s and such.
He was basically just Bob Ross in it.
Oh, man.
Just like, I'm going to do a ground ball up the middle right here. Just a little happy little infield.
Just a happy little dying quail. Right up the middle there.
Score guy from second base. He played American Legion ball in junior high for his youth coach, and went to Oakland Technical for his last 3 years.
Yep.
And George Poles, I believe, was his coach's name, who had a pretty big influence on him. Then during this time, he hit .620 as a captain. He could play all over the diamond, which I found fascinating.
Yep.
And we'll see that in his major league career with how incredible he is.
Just back then, they were saying he literally could have picked his position. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like anywhere in the outfield, catcher. Like it's interesting to think that he was that baseball smart, you know?
Oh, totally. The original Jose Oquendo for the Cardinals. But so his coach Poles was also a bird dog scout for the Cincinnati Red Legs.
Yep, Red Legs, baby.
And in 1956, he gets $4,000 and an invitation to spring training in Tampa, Florida. And, well, let's just say Florida was an even scarier place in the late 1950s than it is. Different reasons, obviously, but yes.
Quite a culture shock when he goes out there.
Quite a culture shock.
They have because they sign him, they send him this like postcard, and they're like, the players stay in this hotel.
Yep.
And he sees it, and it's like this really nice hotel, so he has the cabbie like take him to this hotel. And they're just like, oh, are you one of the black players? Go. And they make him take
like a back door, essentially.
like a back door, yeah, to like literally lead him out the back, be like, you don't stay here. And that was like literally his introduction right off of the plane. Was he was just like, oh, this is so ridiculously racist. And there's a couple other stories we're going to bring up, but that was his entire minor league experience.
God, no wonder Mom slapped that white lady.
Yes, exactly.
Like he would talk about eating meals like Lady and the Tramp style outside.
Yeah.
Like, how can you do that?
Oh.
God, it's awful. So in 1956 at High Point in Thomasville in the Carolina League, much different Carolina League than ground balls are a little more democratic.
Well, then we're used to, you know, it's not the Bull Durham of today.
No.
You know, so
No, it's not.
I'm not going to make that joke again.
Are you? You should. I always love it. He wasn't allowed to use bathroom gas stations in this league. Like, what the?
Wasn't allowed to use bathroom gas stations. There was this one time he put his dirty uniform with the white player's uniform.
Yep.
And the guy who's like cleaning up the uniforms went and got a stick with a nail on it to remove it from there. And then he got like yelled at for it. And he was like,
He got yelled at.
and I'm just saying, this is what happened. He's sitting there naked being like, what? Because he took his uniform off.
I mean, crying with your clothes on is sad enough, but crying naked because that's a level of like how he did not just, go postal on everyone.
That's
kind of ridiculous. So he said his teammates didn't like him on these teams. The guys that actually treated him like they didn't care. They weren't able to speak up and didn't kind of stand up for him. He basically, great quote, he said, "Pride was my resolve." So the entire time he's in the minors, he's like, I'm going to stick it to every piece of garbage in this league and make the major leagues as a member of the Reds.
Well, it's like when they cut old Wild thing.
Oh, right.
You know?
Every time it pitches against him.
He's going to stick it up your fucking ass.
He referred to it, I played my guts out. I completely wiped out that Peckerwood League.
Yes. No, it's awesome because that was his drive. So you're just like, yes, that he was that much better of a player. He just had to, I imagine, catch that confidence and be like, no, you guys suck.
Yeah. I'm so much better. And guess what? I'm throwing my laundry wherever I want to throw my laundry.
Exactly.
He led the league with a .340 batting average and a team record of 29 dingers. League record 133 runs and finished second in RBIs and led the league with 388 putouts from the outfield. Mm-hmm. So makes MLB camp with the Red Legs in 1956 and makes his major league debut that year. But he's not playing very often.
No, he's like barely playing.
Yeah, it's just they have other guys in their outfield. I think Pinson's there already for him, too. So he's a pinch runner, September 9th, 1956, in his first game. And he said that year was very important because he got to see his hero, Jackie Robinson.
That's right.
Who was an inspiration for many non-baseball activities, which we'll discuss later.
I was just going to say, it definitely is the foreshadowing as to what he undertook, like the abuse from... because he literally singled himself out like Jackie did in that first season. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Following season, they send him back down to the minors.
Yes.
But he's playing third base now, which I find like you can just play him anywhere. You can play him anywhere you want to. That year, he's called up by the Reds again. His first hit was a dinger.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah,
that's cool.
the Cubs' Mo Drabowski that year in 56. He mostly plays like just September call-up these years in Cincinnati because he's... I even read it, literally blocked in center field by Veda Pinson. They sent him down to the minors to try and have him learn a new position.
Yep.
So
that makes sense.
That December, though, after playing winter ball in Venezuela as a second baseman, so they're still trying
They're
to...
just, seeing what
They're
sticks.
so good, but like there's this other really good guy. December 5th, 1957, he's traded to the Cardinals, and talk about one of your all-time backfires, Cincinnati. I mean, if he would have come up, both Robinson and Pinson are on the Reds. They make the World Series actually in 61.
Yep.
So you would have had an in his prime Curt Flood with those two other outfielders, and I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
It's pretty lethal, and they all grew up. They all knew each other. So he ends up going to the Cardinals, and not great in his first couple of years.
It's rough on him because they're still kind of trying to figure out where to play him, but he's better and he should be playing, but there's people who don't want him on the team.
There it is. When
So-
he gets to the Cardinals, I found this to be interesting. The manager at the time literally came up to him and another black player and told them that he was just like, I just don't think baseball is in your future.
It was Bob Gibson was the other guy.
Yeah.
But World Series hero
Series, yeah.
Bob Gibson, former Harlem Globetrotter because he was such a fantastic athlete, Bob Gibson.
So it's interesting to see the racism so deep in the team where you're just like, oh, you really had to play that much better to get on the team. And
So basically, his first year in St. Louis, he actually plays.
Yes.
Under the original manager, Fred Hutchinson, and does pretty well for them in 58.
yeah.
But 59 and 60 with manager Salih Hemis, he's basically just not playing him for specific reasons.
There you go.
Men of their time reasons. Flood said when he looked at him, he said he sat on the bench and looked at him like he smelled bad. Like he just didn't want him even in the dugout.
it's wild because
But
guys like that probably ruined so many great careers.
during that time for
it's
dudes
ridiculous.
that didn't want to stick up for him,
Yeah.
and things of that nature. In 61, though,
Yep.
Johnny Keane, the third base coach, is now the new manager, and by early August, he says, "Now you're my center fielder."
And he's such a good hitter and defenseman that it's just like, how can you keep him out of this lineup?
Yeah, and he's
that's-
developing as a hitter more, where
Yep.
he's using more of the field, and he's already a defensive wizard. He hits
Yeah, he
322
really is. Yeah.
for the season, but down the stretch, you're like, okay, we have our guy in center field.
Yes, that position should be locked for the next decade, and possibly longer because they can hold on to players as long as they want.
Yeah,
So-
because in those days there's this thing called the reserve clause.
That's right.
For baseball and all professional sports.
All professional sports at that time, yeah.
But it's the team can sign you to 1-year contracts. You're that property, I
Yes.
guess. Is
No,
a
it
good way
really
of putting
is.
it. They can sign you to 1 year per year contracts, year after year in perpetuity until you're dead,
Yep.
until they cut or trade you,
or you quit.
yeah, or they trade you somewhere where you don't want to go,
Yep.
which
We'll get into
let's
it.
talk about good times.
All right,
So
we're getting into the good times right now. You're right.
And as the Cardinals are now starting to compete with the Dodgers in
Yep.
the National League, as well as the Reds or Red Legs. I don't know when they changed it. 62, he hits 296, 30 doubles, 12 dingers, 70 RBIs, and he's your leadoff guy.
Yes, and 12 dingers is good for this era. You know what I
yeah.
mean? And so for him to be your leadoff guy doing that, you're just like, oh man, those numbers are so good.
So at 63 is even better. He wins his first Gold Glove.
Yep.
They're in center. He's winning these Gold Gloves while Willie Mays is playing center field, by
I was
the
just
way.
going to say, first of 7
In a row.
Yes, and you're like, it's such a ridiculous feat that you're like, oh yeah, he really was the best defensive center fielder in this era.
Teammates would say, though, he would make ridiculous catches look easy.
Yes.
Like, it wouldn't be a sizzle reel catch just because it was like,
It was
he
like
knew
a-
exactly where it was off the bat.
Yep.
That
Yeah,
year,
his anticipation is what I heard a lot of his teammates would say.
led the Major League Baseball in at bats that year. Career had 112 runs, 200 hits. So this dude's a hit machine at the top of the lineup. And this is kind of this 7 or so year window where
Yep.
you could argue best center fielder in the National League, maybe. Hit 302. He had even career highs in total bases that year. With
Yeah.
If your leadoff hitter has 267 total bases, you're probably scoring a lot of runs.
Yes, because he's going to be on base so much.
In '64, they had earlier executed a great trade for future Hall of Famer Lou Brock. So now they move him into the second spot in the lineup, which is perfect because until Rickey Henderson, who had the most stolen bases in MLB history, Lou Brock.
Yeah.
So that's a tough combination there in '64.
Well, it's really a lot of speed in that first two, 1-2.
And then you get into the meat of the lineup, and you're like, oh, Jesus, you can't put these guys on base.
Well, that's why we're about to see how great they are,
First time as an all-star.
Oh, yeah, in '64.
Leads the NL in hits. Hit .311 that year, which is pretty awesome. Wins another Gold Glove, and they go to the World Series and play the Yankees in a very exciting affair there.
He doesn't have a great World Series.
Doesn't have a great one.
Offensively.
But you know who else is on this team? I don't know if you knew this. A person we did an episode on, Bob Uecker.
Oh, yeah.
There is a good story, the tuba repair story.
Yeah.
Where he was catching fly balls.
Catching fly balls. That's great.
So he only hits 200, but they do win in 7 games. So
Yep.
he's a champion. Like, to think of where he was in 59,
Yes.
60,
Now he's a World Series champion on a great team.
Yeah. Following year, another Gold Glove, hitting over 300, 83 RBIs, which is a career high, an All-Star in 66, another Gold Glove, 71 ribby. In 67, they add Orlando Cepeda and Roger Maris to the lineup to get Curt and Lou across the plate and make the World Series. They went over 100 games in 67.
Yeah, in '67, they say that was probably one of their best teams.
Hit 335 that year.
Yep.
Which, I mean,
That's-
out the gate.
That's just such a ridiculously great. And this was before, or this was right when they lowered the mound.
This is the year before.
This is the year
'Cause
before.
68.
So so it's even better. Do you know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah.
It's just saying. So yeah,
Or they raised the mound in
Or they
66.
they
Oh,
raised it. Sorry.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. So they end up beating the Red Sox. Not back to back. 2-time world champion.
This was the series. The guy who should have quit won 3 games. Bob Gibson. He started 3 games and won against the 67 Impossible Dream Red Sox.
Yep.
So,
And then in '68, he's 4th in MVP, and he loses to Bob Gibson, who ends up winning MVP that year. So
well, that's because they raised the mound, and I think he had like just over a 1 ERA that year.
Yeah.
So like
It's so good.
you're just like, okay, well we'll take it down again. We'll
Yep.
take it down. All-Star and Gold Glove hit over 300. They win the NL because obviously this is the last year before division series play, championship series. Then they play the Tigers in the World Series, and
I'll tell you what's interesting.
he has a good series up until
Game 7.
Yeah.
7th inning. It rained a ton the night before. It's a little muddy out there, and he doesn't love the slop. I'll be honest. You know?
Nobody likes slop.
He doesn't like the slop. His mutter was a mutter. So. But if you watch the video of it, he really does take a slip, and there's no way to recover in time to get that ball.
So in a scoreless game, because Gibson's pitching against Mickey Lolich, because Mickey Lolich is going to do the exact same thing Gibson did the previous year, only for the Tigers. Jim Northrup in the top of the 7th. Couple of guys on base. Hits a liner to center field that you would think
It normally
would be a
caught.
good catch.
Yes,
you know, like it wasn't like he hit a Texas leaguer. I mean, he hit it pretty good off of Gibson. I think what happened was he misjudged it off the bat at first.
And then slipped.
And then to recover, he kind of just, I won't say he panics, but he's like, oh man, I got to get on my horse right now. And then just digs in and he slips, ball rolls to the wall, and they end up losing the game 4-1 because of that triple.
Yes.
Which they end up losing, and which is sad because earlier that year in August, he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated where it said, catching the ball on Wrigley Field's ivy. In addition to that, it said baseball's best center fielder.
Yep.
And up until that point, he had been having a great life in St. Louis as far as just like, you know, he was a man about town with the ladies and things of that nature. He had his own photography and art studio. Very popular guy. But
it all changed.
It all changes in this moment because management, one of the Anheuser-Busch people, was not a fan of him missing that ball.
Exactly. And I feel like it compounds in the off season where he wants a raise. He tries to come back. He wants like a $90,000 raise, which is a big one for back then. But you look at how great he's been playing leading up. You're like, oh yeah,
and he needs to pay some child support as well.
He's in a little bit of financial trouble. I'll be honest. I think he has 4 kids with his first wife,
and she had another 2 others, I think. Too.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
There are a lot of mouths for Curt to feed. So
pretty wild. Yeah. So he wants a bunch of money. Management almost gives him an insulting figure, almost to be like, yeah, whatever. I think they offered him $5,000, and then they end up giving in. But he holds out for some of spring training, and that also really drives a wedge between him and the Bud Light people.
Yeah, Gussie Busch, the owner, basically, who he absolutely adored. He painted like paintings of him.
I know they were like really close before this, but
they had like a lecture in spring training. He brought the press out of basically just berating the players.
Yep,
saying like you need to establish more positive relations with the community. Like it was very student athlete-y, if you ask me. And 69, Flood's even said like the season was over before it began because of this.
There was no
morale.
Yes, the morale. That's exactly. Everybody was just like, I want to play for this fucking guy. So
calling the players greedy.
Yep.
And after this season, Curt's kind of had enough. I mean, granted, he does need money, but he's in the prime of his career. What's he, like 30 years old right now?
He really is.
Years old.
Yeah, in the prime.
When you look at his stats, you could make the argument he plays another 5 to 7 years. He doesn't have to do what he's about to do, Chris.
Exactly.
He doesn't. I mean, it's not like he's some fringe player, but he says, screw it. I want to challenge baseball's reserve clause so we can get paid more, or at least, to me, it's not even about the pay. It's more about, if I get traded somewhere, I don't want to go to a crappy place, which is what happens.
Okay, so he gets traded to Philly.
Yes.
And what he says about Philly was pretty accurate.
I mean, it's very flippant. They booed Santa.
Where he was just like, I don't want to move my family to this racist city to play in the Connie Mack Stadium that's literally falling apart. And you're like, oh, yeah. I mean, he's not saying incorrect things. Do you know what I mean?
Well, one of the guys he was traded for, Dick Allen, who I don't think he's in the Hall of Fame yet, but he was an AL MVP eventually.
Yeah.
They ran him out of town because of racism.
Exactly.
We're not.
And so Flood is like, I'm not doing this. I should be able. I've been playing in the MLB for 12 years, or whatever it was at this point. It might have been 11. But he was just like, I should be able to become a free agent at this time, or at least like
have a no trade clause.
Have a no trade clause. That was the other thing that gets introduced later. He literally has this thought, and to be honest, I saw that the Phillies general manager went and talked to him, and he left the meeting thinking that Flood actually was going to come play.
Yeah.
And then Flood went and had a talk with the union, and the union,
Marvin Miller, the head of the union,
and they said, we will back you on this. And he was like, oh, all right, yeah.
They were more or less like, we'll back you, but you know what you're like. They will blackball you. At worst, they'll blackball you from baseball. You're never going, like, you are going to ruin your professional career.
Exactly.
What you're doing is right, but if they were more or less saying like, look, you have to understand what you're doing, but just, it's correct.
And yes, it will. This is the thing that is unfortunate with these kind of things is it's not necessarily going to benefit him because it's not going to come in time, but it's going to benefit all the other athletes coming in the future. You know what I mean? So like,
but the saddest part was he didn't have the type of support from teammates.
Anybody. Yeah.
Gibson wouldn't stand up for him. He said, like, I'm with you, but like I have children.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there were people who actively called him out, like Carl Yastrzemski and Harmon Killebrew, who were just like, what are you doing? It's like, well, this will benefit all of you.
So he ends up suing to essentially make himself a free agent.
Yeah, and not only himself, but
to remove the reserve clause from all contracts.
Yeah,
essentially.
So you're not signed in perpetuity. At least if you sign a contract, it's for a specific amount of time, not 1 year after.
Exactly.
The team has discretion over. So in Flood versus Kuhn, they go up in the state Supreme Court, and they take it all the way to the federal Supreme Court to argue against, like, I don't want to call it, let's say indentured servitude is a good way of describing it.
Not bad. And I saw this, so he's sitting out this year.
1970.
1970. He said it was the first spring that he wasn't playing baseball. He's drinking a lot more. He's smoking a lot more.
There was Gibson was saying he was his roommate on the road, and like this is even before this stuff would happen, just due to like child support and other finances. He was like, I would see him constantly smoking like 5 cigarettes in a row at like 3 a.m.
Yeah, just chain smoking all day, and you're just like, oh man. So he's definitely not doing great. Essentially,
it's being away from the structure of baseball.
Yes,
is that you can be a man about town all year long now, Curt.
Yes,
which there's some people who can handle it, and with him, it was kind of like, I won't say it was awful, but it definitely didn't help him.
It was too much, I feel like.
And you don't have an income either.
So now he's like banking on this $100,000 a year, and now he really doesn't have it. And this was the other thing, was the public perception of him was not good. So like he didn't have like the fans on his side. Like he literally, that was something that I thought was interesting, where they were like, you're complaining about getting something like we make a tenth of what you make in a year.
But see, what's lost in the narrative, it's like, yeah, he wants more money because who's coming to those ball? They're not coming to watch the owners play. To me, the most important thing was I should have the freedom, and that's kind of where we get into why this stuff stops. I should have the opportunity to sell my services around a profession once my contract expires.
Yes.
Like to free agent right there, but I mean to freely say, hey,
explore your options.
I'm available.
Yes. And it does. That's what the free market is going to do, is increase player salaries no matter what. But it's.
There are guys that get paid $100,000 an inning now.
Oh, I know. Jeez.
I'm not even joking. It's ridiculous.
Well, Ohtani only makes $2 million for his whole thing.
Yeah, but he's got the Bobby Bonilla deal.
Oh my God!
I can't wait for that to blow up in the. Anyway, sorry. Back to Curt Flood.
I would love that.
But goes to the Supreme Court, and unfortunately, because one of the I forget the justice's name, he had stock or some sort of interest in the Cardinals.
Yeah.
So he couldn't be impartial. Like he had to just be like, I recuse myself. I can't make a decision here. And in Flood versus Kuhn, who was the commissioner, Bowie Kuhn, he loses. 5-3 but he took it all the way to the highest court in America.
Well, and it showed not just the MLB's players union, but all the players unions, that they were like, oh yeah, we need to get this out.
Well, and this is the thing with the MLB players union, because of things like this that they fought for so early, and because there had been previous Supreme Court rulings back from the 20s upholding the reserve clause.
Them, yes.
And basically what this did was try and challenge baseball from not being taxable.
Yeah, so they went after them being because they have antitrust.
Antitrust, yeah.
Which was interesting that they were the only sports, and they finally got rid of their antitrust thing in 98.
Literally the only thing they have antitrust like still left is like things like expansion and a few other things, but they completely ended up wiping it out.
Yeah. And it's the first pebble, if you will, was Curt Flood doing this. He really changed baseball more than almost anybody off the field. Do you know what
100%. He changed professional sports.
Yeah, professional sports, yes.
Because if you go back and listen to our NFL free agency episode, that didn't happen until over 20 years later.
Yes. Where everybody was just like, yeah, we should do that. It's so funny because you're right. And that's why baseball's union was so strong, because they were like literally the first, just being like players first.
Yeah, not only players first, but like, yeah, this is something that we used to do here that we don't want to do anymore.
Yeah, no, seriously. So he ends up going to Denmark, I believe.
We goes to Denmark to kind of avoid paying some child support
Yep.
and some other things. His older brother had gotten him in some trouble that pissed off the Cardinals organization.
I forgot about that. His
robbing
brother.
a jewelry store.
Brother got arrested, and it's always funny when people have like little quotes like this. The guy was just like, yeah, his brother got arrested in what I can only explain as a poorly planned jewelry heist. And you're just like, yeah, he was just like, they busted him like 2 blocks down.
I mean, we're 22 years away from Point Break. Maybe he should have just waited and done his research.
You got to do your research.
He would have put on the Dwight Eisenhower mask.
I don't know any Eisenhower quotes. I'm not a crook.
He was his vice president?
Yeah.
Actually was. Son of a bitch.
So good.
Why do I know this? I shouldn't know this. But anyway.
So he goes to Denmark. He definitely disappears into the fabric of that society. He doesn't play baseball. He's just out painting and drinking and fucking, which, I mean, hats off.
I mean, according to my dad, that was his favorite place in the world to go, Denmark.
Yeah.
Like as far as just weather, things to do. I mean, yeah, I could see getting lost in Copenhagen for a while. So,
but then
reality gets a chance.
Reality kind of kicks in, and the Phillies actually trade him. Mm-hmm. And they trade him to the old Washington Senators.
Coached by Ted Williams. And
he makes the decision to come back, even though it's a hard one. And
it's a hard one because that year away, it's not like he was away for a year and was like physically conditioning himself.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
like it's not like he was staying in baseball shape or like training. Like it's not like he went to the Dominican or Venezuela or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I'm just going to play in your leagues just to like stay in shape. Like baseball was probably the furthest thing from his mind and for him, it probably had to be because it was so hurtful to watch.
Yes.
Like being away from it was the best worst thing for him.
Exactly.
So he comes back to the Senators and he's out of shape.
Out of shape and he doesn't
motivated.
have because there's just like skills that I feel like you have and you've honed for so many years, and now that you go back, because this is what I forget which coach said it, but he was like, the first week you looked at him and you're like, this guy's never played baseball or professional baseball a day in his life. This is crazy. That's what it looked like.
Crazy because he's the best center fielder in MLB for like a half a decade.
And he was given those votes of confidence that they were like, we feel like if he has enough time, he will be not the player he was, but at least not a problem.
To me, that was what's always been lost in the Curt Flood story because no one ever remembers the Washington years. Mm-hmm. Nobody ever remembers that he wasn't blackballed from baseball.
No, not after.
Had he come out and performed for the Senators, he probably would have retired as a Texas Ranger when they eventually moved in a few years.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And you said this too, where he probably would have had 3,000 hits. There's so many things that like
he probably would have had if he kept playing. I don't know if he would have had the most, but he would have been top 2 or 3 at worst for Gold Gloves by a center fielder.
Oh yes.
So it's just what we're working with. But he came back not in shape.
Yep.
He didn't even last the season.
I was just going to say, what you said, where he was unmotivated, where you can just tell when he came back out of shape and just not, he was just like, I just want the fucking money.
I want to have sex with blonde women and drink Carlsberg and then maybe do another Bob Ross thing. So.
I might go to Denmark pretty soon.
Hey, go check out our soccer episodes on Denmark.
Yeah, no, I love that. Denmark in a decade of dominance. I forgot what I called it.
Decade of Denmark.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, but Curt Flood, man, it's a sad story, but you look at professional sports now and he literally is like the Jackie Robinson of free agency.
Well, the kind of the saddest part though is in those years afterwards, they tried getting him back into baseball, but his drinking was so bad.
It was so bad.
Like he was play-by-play for the A's,
and
it lasted a season from all his old contacts in Oakland. He was a commissioner of the senior professional baseball league, and then, but what meant the most to him is when baseball went on strike in '94. All of the players who were sitting out rallied around him.
Oh yeah,
because unlike his contemporaries who were talking mad shit, the younger guys understood
the value.
Because that was the strike based around teams wanting to implement, owners wanting to implement a salary cap,
Yep.
which would have drove down wages and would have screwed with free agency.
Yep.
So he basically sacrificed himself for future generations of professional athletes as far as the ability to negotiate on your behalf, I guess.
Yes, in his prime. This is the thing that I do, because his drinking really became a problem after when the court case, not being in baseball. So it really took the prime of the best center fielder in this era. You know what I mean? So it's sad, and
a lot of people don't even know who he is.
Yes,
that's kind of why I brought him up. I'm like, this is a very important sports person.
Yes, this has been a great episode.
So thank you.
Check this out.